So now that you've got your room and your audio gear all set up and ready to go, you can actually move on to recording your first episode of your podcast. Now if you're doing this locally, that is without any remote guests, then GarageBand should be a great option for you. There's no reason why you can't just start up the app and hit record, and you'll be off to the races. No need to spend extra money. But if you're looking to record with somebody over Skype, iChat, or another voice over IP tool, then you're going to need one of two tools, either Paizo or Audio Hijack Pro. Now Paizo is a little sibling of Audio Hijack Pro. Essentially what it lets you do is both of these applications let you record audio from any source on your Mac. So you can see right now that it's actually chosen my built-in microphone as the source. The magic here is that you can actually choose an application as your source. So you could select Skype as your source, and then it's going to start up Skype. And then from there, you would record your call, or you would do your call as you normally would, all the while having both ends of it being recorded. The only thing to note is that you need to make sure then to go into your Skype preferences, and then for audio, you need to make sure that you actually have your microphone that you want to use selected for the podcast. So if you're using your built-in microphone, you'd want to switch that to your external microphone, either USB or otherwise. So you'll notice though that Paizo is actually a pretty small application and it doesn't have much going on. So basically the problem is it's what you see is what you get. That is, your settings here are extremely limited and there's no way to export an uncompressed file, which is required for Levelator. So again, if you're okay with the quality, after one recording you don't really plan on editing it very much afterwards, then Paizo should be a fine tool for you. But if you want that extended flexibility and control, then I would recommend that you move up to the slightly more expensive Audio Hijack Pro. But the expense is definitely worth it. You can see it's a far more complicated application, but in this one input tab alone, it more than doubles the functionality of Paizo. So it's definitely worth the money for the upgrade, and it's going to put you on the road to be a far more professional grade podcaster. So again, you get to choose your audio source in Audio Hijack Pro. Here I've selected an application and Skype again. You can do scheduling stuff, which isn't really required per se for doing a podcast, so we're going to skip over that. But then under recording, what I would recommend doing is selecting as your quality for burning to CD in parentheses AIFF, which is one of the highest quality recordings that you can do, and it's an uncompressed recording, meaning that it's perfect to run through Levelator, which will make your podcast sound really a bunch more professional without having to worry about actually editing it yourself. It's just a drag it and do it solution. You'll also notice under here that you have a couple options in terms of how to save your file. Of course, you can choose where you want to save your file to, but then to name the recordings, you're actually seeing that we have variables set. So the variable of the name of the file, which we set in our tag, date, and time. If you click on this, you just see this little X button for the variable symbol, and you can actually choose from a bunch of variables. This is an extremely powerful tool and only present in Audio Hijack Pro, which is basically going to allow you to start up Audio Hijack Pro and press record, and you're going to be left with what is essentially basically a finished product, unless you want to run it through a tool like Levelator. And then if we go over to tags, you can see that this entire screen can be customized using variables. So if you want to have each episode of your title have the date in it, you can do that. You can do it in any way that you want, and you can set up these presets and they'll be ready each time you open up the application. So for example, while your episode title will probably change from episode to episode, your artist, your album, your composer, those kind of things aren't going to change. Your genre, all those things are not going to really change. You'll also notice that I have a variable set in here for a couple different things. One of my favorites, and by far just an obvious one to do for anybody, is year, which will let you never have to worry about the year changing when you're doing your podcast. If you're podcasting from 2013 to 2014, then you'll never have to worry about the date being weird on your files. It's got that all set up for you. I also have under track, I have it set up so it uses the file index as the track number. You can do a bunch of different things with this. Again, variables are really powerful, and I would just encourage you to play around with them. You're also going to want to select artwork, which this gives me a good time to talk a little bit about the artwork that you're going to want to use for recording your podcast. I create all my artwork at 2048 by 2048 pixels. That's the resolution of the Retina iPad, so I figure that it's a very good file size, or a very good resolution to use. Now what you're going to want to do from there is, if you do create it at that level, then you can scale it down to 1400 by 1400, which is the resolution that Apple asks for. Just drag it onto here, you're all set to go, and again, this is a one-time thing. Thanks to the Audio Hijack Pro preset system, you're not going to have to worry about doing this every time like you would in Paizo. From there, you can also select effects, which are really cool and really powerful. This is going to make your podcast, if you want to play around with them, sound much, much better. So here I've got a low pass filter set up. So what that's going to do is you actually get presented with a little editor, and it gives you a cutoff for a frequency that doesn't hit a certain point. So again, if you've got fan noise in the background or any of those things, theoretically it could be cut off using some sort of filter. You actually have a bunch of effect choices. You can go through and just see them. Some of them are obvious. Some of them are not so obvious. We've got things like EQs, application mixers. All these things are things that you can really only get in Audio Hijack Pro. And to me, actually make it a far more powerful tool, even for local recordings, than just GarageBand. Now up top, you're going to notice that Audio Hijack Pro is a lot more complicated than Paizo, but it's not necessarily difficult to use either. You're given a couple choices: hijack, mute, record, pause, and split. Basically, you're going to want to choose one of two things: hijack or record. If you choose to hijack, then it's just going to open up the application and start intercepting its audio. If you press record, it's going to start recording that intercepted audio. You don't have to necessarily, if you just want to go straight to recording, then pressing record without pressing hijack will automatically start hijacking it for you, but you can't press hijack and then forget to record. So it's like the square and the rectangle situation, where a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not necessarily a square. You can record and it will automatically hijack, but hijacking won't automatically record. You're also probably going to want to select mute for most recordings. That way you don't hear yourself. Which brings me to another great point. Whenever you're podcasting, you need to use headphones. There's no way around this. And if you don't, you're going to get some terrible reverb, and it's basically going to be unlistenable. So from there, you would just press record, and then you would get the audio file. There's really nothing else to it. Just stop pressing record when you're done. I actually have a couple sample audio files already on my desktop so that we can move on with the rest of the producing process. So I'm going to quit out of Audio Hijack Pro. Let's say that we've actually recorded our podcast, and now we have our raw AIFF file. What you're going to want to do next is open up a tool called Levelator. Again, this is another free tool and definitely a worthwhile one. Just drag your uncompressed file onto the Levelator, and then it will automatically convert and spit out another uncompressed file. This time, however, it will sound much better because the levels will be fixed. You and your guest will sound about the same level, and it's just a worthwhile tool to do. Again, it takes maybe 10 to 15 minutes for an hour-long show, so I don't want to sit through that right now. Again, let's just pretend that this has been levelated. I guess that's the past tense. Levelated. The next thing that you're going to want to do is, now you've got an AIFF file, which is most likely, if it's an hour-long show, about 500 megabytes. You don't want to have to put that up on any sort of podcast hosting solution. It's just completely unfeasible. Nothing will play it. You need to get this into an MP3 file. End of story. There's a bunch of different ways to do this. Literally, if you Google audio converter, you can find just about any number of them made for the Mac that work online. Like I said, basically anything you want. The one I've chosen is actually a video converter that actually has a nice MP3 preset, which gives you a nice small MP3 without much work. And it actually uses FFmpeg, which is just about the best MP3 converter you're going to find. It's free and open source, but you have to use the command line. So what Miro Video Converter does is it puts a nice graphical interface on top of it. I'll just drag it on as I did, and then just press convert. Again, for the purposes of this tutorial, I've actually just put another sample MP3 file on my desktop so that we can move on. Unfortunately, what this does is it actually strips away a lot of the tags that we made in Audio Hijack Pro. So those tags and that functionality really only goes so far if you're planning on editing it even more. It is possible to find an audio converter that doesn't strip away those tags, but Miro does. So this is where users of Paizo would also want to pick up, because they're going to have to put these tags in regardless of whether or not they convert their audio, whatever tool they use. The tool that I've chosen to add tags to our audio file is called Tagger. That's Tagr, and I put a link to that in the tutorial. We're just going to click on it, and then you can see that you basically have an interface that kind of looks like a music player, but it's not a music player. It lets you edit the metadata tags on your music. So then we've got our MP3 file, just drag it here, and then from here we can actually just enter in a title. So we'll do 01 test episode. You can set your artist and any other number of things, including changing your file name, album artist, album, genre, year, comments, part of a compilation. Always a good thing to check when you're using a podcast. And then again, for your artwork, just drag it right there and then press save to disk. And you can see that our file is actually updated with some nice metadata. So that was a very worthwhile exercise and one that didn't take too long. So again, if you run it through Levelator and then through another converter, chances are that you're going to lose some of this metadata along the way, and Tagger's a great way to get it back. But now you're ready to upload your file to whatever service you use, and you've just created your first podcast.